Have you ever come across the term super podcast episodes? These are really important parts of your podcast content strategy, especially if you are a small business owner. So if you said, yep, I have never heard. Yes, I'm a small business owner. This is the episode that you absolutely need to listen to. And so also with pen and paper. In case we haven't met, hi, I'm Anna. I'm the founder of the podcast space. I'm a podcast content strategist and marketer. And basically, this show is a very practical way to elevate your podcast journey and grow your business and influence through the show. So let's dive right in. As we are closing the year, and if you're listening to this in real time, you're probably thinking, okay, it's time to analyze what has worked on the podcast, what hasn't, and what you should be doing more of in 2024. In last week's episode, I covered how to read analytics like a pro, and so many of you told me that that was such a helpful episode because you were looking at your content strategy for 2024 in a completely different light. And of course, it also coincided with the release of Spotify Wrapped, which honestly, I had no idea that was going to drop on the same day that I released the episode. So, hey, super convenient. But the truth is that as I was looking through my content strategy for the year, I was thinking, okay, I need to create a podcast episode kind of like, quote unquote, looking into the performance of the podcast this year, what did well. And then I was thinking about what are my super podcast episodes? And I was like, oh, hang on a second. I have not covered what are super podcast episodes. So super podcast episodes are those that as you're looking around the year, they were kind of like listener favorites. And sometimes I think it's relevant to put super podcast episodes under two categories, like those that were super relevant for podcast listeners and that organically they searched for those, but also the episodes that you know that you proactively pushed a bit more. And because that sometimes is something that, like, again, I talk about how you can use your podcast as a useful tool for your business instead of just content or just as a sales tool. And for instance, I find myself always referring back to the same podcast episodes because I know that clients have issues with specific things that, again, to save myself time, I created episodes about that to help them in their own time. Okay, so what does that look like when you're actually looking at the content? So when you're looking through your lens, the host, you're looking at podcast episodes that you know your listeners asked you about, like questions that they have, and you're answering time and time again in real time, whether that is through questions on the DMs, emails, or even client work, as I was just sharing about my own situation. So have you done every single Q&A episode that is going to help your clients currently at the moment, but also is going to, and this is like super, super important, so pay attention. In terms of Q&As, there's Q&As that are just for the people who already work with you, people who are just not necessarily going to be working with you, but you're building that authority long term. But there's the super episodes that are kind of the ones that will be very important for the undecided people. So people who are thinking maybe it's between you and a few other peers, or maybe between you and not making that investment at all. So when you're thinking about super episodes, you have to consider, am I talking about these topics that are super important for my business and that are going to be helping these customers who are undecided to make that decision to do the jump to doing business with you, right? Or that is to, for instance, do content that is going to help you become an authority. And so if you're trying to get speaking engagements, those are going to be those super episodes, like they're super valuable. And so from your personal perspective, when you're looking at those, you really have to determine, like, have I not covered episodes that are super important because maybe they take longer. Maybe I'm still in that phase where I'm like just trying to get scattered information. Maybe you're trying to go over a hump and you just don't feel motivated at all. So make sure that you're actually covering those topics because long term, again, when we're looking at immediate scale, right, like we don't need to worry too much because all of this content is going to be kind of impacting our business long term. But when we're looking at long term, so, over 9 months, over 12 months, we have to have these episodes. And again, a huge mistake that I see is small business owners not really knowing what their Q&As are, what the big questions are that they get. And so they're creating all of these random content that is doing nothing for their business. So for instance, recording an episode on like the day in the life, or talking about like something in the news. And, you have to be really strategic about the type of content you're creating if you want more leads in your business. If you want to become an authority, right, you need to take the time to determine what is the type of episode that consistently, either through a series or just specific times in the year, is going to get you there. So from the standpoint of the listener searching organically for this type of content, you really have to put your detective hat on. And when you're looking at the analytics, right, you're looking at those super episodes that, time and time again, they are listened to by people because they're just really interested. So for instance, in my case, I know that every type of episode that is about marketing your podcast, content strategy, social media, and podcast discovery, I know those are always going to be super episodes. And I was even looking at the last 90 days, and for sure, those were episodes that are like how to increase your podcast discoverability. Also, the ones about mindset. I feel like also, especially at the end of the year, a lot of people are trying to get motivated to either just finish the year or determine if they have been missing a very important part of their content strategy and, why they're not connecting with their listeners. So when we're looking at those episodes that are based on, the listener's organic interest, we really need to pay attention. And these tend to be always the same, right? Like how you're approaching a specific topic if you're a coach. So like kind of like those things that you are normally known for, right? For instance, your first episode will always be something that they always seek because they want to understand what is your journey and like what was the podcast inception story, what will they get out of it. But also when you're looking at super episodes from listeners, it's also sometimes how you view the industry in a specific way, especially if there's a lot of different people doing a lot of different things. And so people are trying to figure out, like, are you the person for me? And then they go through. And again, when you're listening to this, revisit episode 19, where I'm talking about how titles can really be important elements when helping listeners journey. So basically doubling your downloads or just helping listeners go on a binge because they understand what every single episode title is giving them. That is the information that they need in order to make a decision about, do I want to listen or not? And so when you're thinking about those super episodes, really think about like also, why were these super episodes? What was I doing? Was I titling these episodes differently? Was it about the guest? Also listen back to episode 47 because I'm talking about analytics and super important here. And so when you're looking back into the episodes that are organically being found by listeners, make sure that are you looking at your own website's analytics? Because sometimes you can determine that you are ranking on a specific keyword that you did not realize you were ranking for. So you want to make sure that you're going onto that page and be really intentional and strategic about how you're displaying information on that page to help and guide the listener that may be a new listener into a very warm lead into your business, right? And the one thing that I want to finish with is that so many times I'm working with clients, and if the podcaster has been doing the show for a while, they sometimes get surprised about the type of episodes they are considered super episodes because they always see themselves in a specific light, but when they're looking at the actual data, sometimes there's something that is working that they didn't realize at the time. And so when we're looking holistically about the website, or maybe it's, a social media post that actually driving traffic to that, or maybe it's a guest that has shared that episode. So there's so much about what is making a super episode, and how you can learn from that recipe in order to double your downloads, in order to establish trust faster with your listeners so that they become clients and customers and advocates for your work faster, even if they don't buy, they just love you more, which is super important when you're creating content that is of a legacy. And so I do want to challenge you to keep an open mind when you're looking into your podcast analytics and revisiting your super episodes, because truly about 2024, you really want to double down on those things that are already working, because so many of you have told me how you're super overwhelmed, how there's so much that, technology and AI have helped, but at the same time, it feels like everything is more saturated. And so it feels like it's harder to stand out, which makes sense. But again, when you're looking at your numbers, you know what is working. So I want to make sure that you're looking at it from the standpoint of at least a minimum of, 6 to 8 months. So if you haven't been podcasting for that long, then, just make sure that you do have on your content strategy those winning episodes that you talk about in the upcoming future. But also, this is like, as for anyone who is a small business owner who has a product and service, this is my challenge to you to also realize that if you know you have an upcoming season which is a bit slower, actually start bringing back all of that content that are super episodes and going to be favorites, listener favorites. So start ahead of those slow seasons, because those conversations with clients, and I know this for a fact because I've been having those conversations myself. It's the beginning of the year very soon, and so people want to start the year the new kind of like refreshed and excited and with proper guidance. So if that's your case, just plan ahead. All right, so your challenge this week, if you want to do any type of, I don't like calling it a homework, but if you want to challenge yourself and figure those out, then go ahead and analyze your podcast episodes and try to see any spikes in downloads or consistently, like some specific episodes are always getting traction, and see what is working. And so if you want any help to help you sort through all of the data that feels unsexy and boring and unexciting, well, you can always work with me on getting that done. And so you can find ways to work with me in the show notes at thepodcastspace.com. And I cannot wait to hear about your ahas on Instagram. Always talk to me on Instagram. I'm at the podcast space, and I cannot wait to talk to you there. So just keep creating content that is authentic, that is imperfect, but moves you forward. I'll see you in the next episode.